What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we'll be taking a look at the Bitcoin price chart, which sits just shy of $115,000. But of course, we'll be taking a look over here at the altcoin market, which touched its 2021 all-time high throughout the weekend hours. Of course, it's a very big week this week, as we're going to be having the FOMC meeting on Wednesday, which we do live stream, and it's expected that the Federal Reserve is going to be cutting interest rates for the first time of 2025. The expectation is that it will be 0.25% of a cut, or 25 basis points. There's like a 6% chance that it ends up being 50 basis points or 0.5%. However, these 2-month and 3-month yields have done a pretty good job predicting it. And right now, the yields have it predicted at 25 basis points or 0.25%. We can see that both on the 2-month and over there on the 3-month, with both of them sitting at about 4%, which would be 25 basis points. This, of course, is a highly anticipated event of an easing cycle or cutting cycle starting for the Federal Reserve. Market participants on edge. The market is on edge. We're at like this incredible deciding point for the market on whether it wants to expand or if it's not going to be able to expand. And we're all kind of waiting for Wednesday to come to see if that's going to be our catalyst event to be able to push the market out. I did just publish a newsletter. It's one of the longest newsletters that I've done. It's got a 43-minute audio recording. We're talking all about the current state of the market and, of course, coming up to this catalyst event happening this week. But throughout the weekend, during the weekend hours for crypto, because we're a 24-hour market, we saw the market try to poke up a little bit higher. But as we're now getting back to stock market hours, the market's pulling back, getting back to kind of where it was before the weekend, awaiting to see how the stock market's going to end up reacting. And of course, we're all just kind of waiting for Wednesday to see what that catalyst is going to do. A lot of times leading up to the Fed, we could see volatility. During the Fed, we see volatility, and afterwards we see volatility. But as we all know, it's pretty rare that we're actually going to get something happening from the Fed. So this is a pretty big one. As we know, it's been a very unique dynamic in broader markets and the crypto market for the past 4 years, with the Russell 2000 and the altcoin market still unable to clear the 2021 highs. And here we are in late 2025. That's never happened, where it's taken this long for not only the altcoin market, but for the Russell 2000. And does this finally provide that catch-up trade for both of those, as we have had a collapsing of breadth happen in the market through all these phases, and it's been a very isolated trade. So the market certainly is on edge of how it's going to react on Wednesday. The thing that we know is that we're back at this all-time high. And when you get back to all-time highs, or prices are surging to the upside, and if you're building a top, what is usually happening in markets? We usually have irrational exuberance, extreme risk-taking, YOLO, we're all going to make it. And then there's typically a strong chastising of the bears that's happening. But of course, what's fascinating about this moment in time of hitting the all-time highs is that the crowd still isn't here. The Coinbase app ranking still place it at 296. All my back-end data shows the crowd is not here, like by any means. The crowd behavior is like we're in a bear market. Like, even if somebody wanted to argue with these two peaks or something and say, oh, it's just like this, right? We're just setting another little tip. I can tell you, I was here then. I have all the back-end data to look at that. The crowd was euphoric in here. For those who were here in 2021, reflect back on it of how many people were saying we're going to $100,000, right? Here on this channel, we're like, no, it's not. But the crowd was still irrational. You don't have any of that going on in this market right now whatsoever. Meanwhile, we just touched a new all-time high for the altcoin market. So there's lots of technical indicators we can look at, of course, and we do that on this channel all the time. But the biggest missing piece to the puzzle of if this was the top is that element. But what's also fascinating is that we have the Bitcoin dominance hitting the 786 Fibonacci retracement, months of down, and indicators that have certainly broken their trends happening in here on large time frames. That the entire ride back up, getting back to this retracement level hits, and then everything completely turns on itself, losing all of its bullish momentum happening in here for the Bitcoin dominance, which implies that breadth is widening throughout the market, and it's not just the Bitcoin show. It's like the crowd doesn't even realize that the total market cap of the cryptocurrency market had its highest weekly close in history yesterday. Total 2, or the altcoin market, even had its highest weekly close in history. You can see that from back here in 2021, then shift yourself over here to late 2024, and then your little peak over here in August, boom, new highest weekly close in history. But it's incredibly common that the crowd does not pour in until what? New all-time highs. And you could argue, oh, there's lots of people here. Well, there's always lots of people here, but we're talking about the come and go crowd, the crowd that pours in, or your normies that pour in, the TikTok watchers, all of those people, right? So as we approach this moment where we're going to see a Fed rate cut and there's a lot of uncertainty on how will the market react as we get back there, if it's going to end up giving its big complete bust out, or is there some surprise that comes to the market and it's not what everybody is saying, where they show Jerome Powell with the money printer meme or the printer is coming, but it's more like, hey, employment is getting really bad. There's cracks in the housing market. We're not doing this because things are awesome. We're doing it because things are bad. I don't know. It could give a different reaction to the market there on Wednesday, right? But when we look at it just on the technical side of everything and the structural setup of everything, the market looks great. The market looks poised. The altcoin market's back at the high with no signs of euphoria, no signs of irrational exuberance, no extreme risk taking. We have the indicators on the larger time frame for the Bitcoin dominance. We have Ethereum bucking up against the high. And I wrote about this in the newsletter as well. A fascinating thing about Ethereum is that it kind of comes in two parts. One, I've said, I don't think this thing is going to bust out of here unless the Russell 2000 is able to bust out of here at the exact same time. I still hold that belief. I still think that's the mandatory requirement for this market to get moving. But one thing I wrote about in the newsletter is the Ethereum dominance. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, what happens if Ethereum does bust out of here? What happens if it starts ripping? Well, it's not every day that we pull up the Ethereum dominance over here on the channel, but you'll get why I am. The current level that we're at was the support level for Ethereum dominance for about 3.5 years. Once it started breaking this level back in August of last year, that's where Ethereum essentially became the laughing stock of the cryptocurrency market. Then it bounced and it shot all the way back up here. And it just so happens to get right back to the support level that it was at as it's back at its previous all-time high. Now, what do you think would happen if Ethereum was able to bust into a new all-time high? Do you think that the Ethereum dominance would go busting into a new high at the exact same time? Well, that's where it's fascinating to go back and look back at 2020 and 2021. And we'll pull Ethereum up on here and we can see where Ethereum breaks into its new all-time high. It happens right here. So I've got Ethereum here on this chart. I've got the Ethereum dominance overlaid on top. We can see this line right in here. And notice that this is the moment in time where Ethereum breaks into its new all-time high over here in early February. Notice that as Ethereum goes back to its all-time high, the Ethereum dominance does rise, but it finds resistance there. And then upon the breakout, it does take a little pop here on the breakout, but then whoosh, down goes the Ethereum dominance, essentially losing the whole rise that it had, getting itself back to the all-time high. Why is that? Because once this break happens, who goes sailing with it? Everybody else, total 3. Notice that Ethereum pops out, and then upon Ethereum popping out, shortly there later, like a day or two later, boom, there goes the altcoin market, really rampaging really heavily. Now, would that make sense that that would happen here? That we could see Ethereum break out and then the rest of the altcoin market go? Well, if that theory is true, that it's going to be the Russell 2000 taking it out, and then the market's like, oh, Ethereum, let's go, and doesn't realize, wait a minute, this means the whole market, then would it make sense that Ethereum has reached a major resistance level in here? Ethereum could still break out into a new all-time high, however, still implying that there's a fall to happen in the Ethereum dominance because the rest of the market is going to be the show-stopping event. And so, of course, you look to this and you say, oh no, the Ethereum dominance has reached a major resistance level. Does that mean that it's bearish? Well, technically, what it meant is once it reached a major resistance level, it was actually bullish. It actually meant Ethereum then busted out into a new high, and then the altcoin market took away the market share. So you have these interesting dynamics happening on Ethereum with it back at the all-time high, just like it did back in 2021, while you have the Bitcoin dominance flashing these major indicators over in here, and you have the altcoin market having its highest weekly closes in history. While not the highest weekly close in history, we did see that Total 3 had its highest daily close in history with its first ever close above the 2021 high. It's like we're at just such a massive level here for the market. And it just happens to show up when we, of course, have this major event coming on Wednesday, an anticipated event, the market all wondering what's going to happen. Is this going to send the market skyrocketing? And it's really just such an intriguing time. And one of the things I wrote in the newsletter is not being like, this isn't just a big moment. This is the moment. You don't get very many times where you have all these confluence lineups happening at the exact same time with broader markets here, and at the exact same time the crypto market, and then at the exact same time have this catalyst event coming up on Wednesday that is historically something that can be retail investor fuel, right? We know in 2021 it was essentially the fuel. The whole narrative was inflation and money printing and devaluation of the dollar, and I have to own assets because if I don't, they're going to deteriorate everything. And now they're going to start cutting. And does this end up being the fuel for the market? It's like we're at like two different places at the exact same time. We're like at the most dangerous place in the market, being back at the all-time high, because this is areas that historically can reject very aggressively. But it's also at the same time a very exciting time, because if it doesn't, and if it busts out of here, then that triggering event is what tends to pull in the crowd. That's what it creates, the irrational exuberance, the extreme risk taking, and like the multi-week crazy euphoria of altcoins and things like that, right? So it's a major moment of unknown going into Wednesday. With Bitcoin, there's still a lot of unknowns in there, right? Is this just a backtest that's happening here? Are we going to create the parabola of excitement for the next few weeks? Have we already gotten beyond that point? Is this moment nothing more than this happening in here? Is the Fed meeting going to be devastating? Or do we have to be cautious of things that we've seen in past cycles, and especially of what we saw back in 2021, where we saw an event on the horizon coming and the market rampaged into that event, and then it still kept pumping, but then 3 days after the event, what happened? Everything started falling apart. And of course, I'm referring back to 2021 when Elon Musk went on Saturday Night Live, right? Everybody knew about that date way ahead of time. This one, we've all known the date way ahead of time. What happens if we actually end up seeing Bitcoin go for a 702 Fibonacci retracement? Prices work their way up to like $19,300. The altcoin market keeps pushing upwards in that moment, and the crowd goes absolutely euphoric right there. Well, that would be exactly what we saw before things got really bad in 2021, and exactly what we saw before things got really bad in 2018. So that's something we will touch topics on if that starts to present itself. I don't want to bombard you with that because we're going into this meeting. There's a lot of unknown in what will happen in here. Does it cause a big, massive breakout? Does this become irrelevant, or do we actually see that eventually show up? If it shows up, then I'm going to make a video on it immediately. But I try not to create too many videos where I just present a lot of different various scenarios, and then if one of the scenarios plays out where I talked about that, and that's what I said, and I covered all my bases. It's something that we would lock in on if it started to present itself. But we know in 2021 and in 2018 we went back into a 702 Fibonacci retracement. The altcoin market kept pushing higher, the crowd went euphoric, and then problems arrived. Right now, there's no sign of a euphoric crowd. I just showed you that. There's no major rampage happening in the altcoin market right now. So there's not signs of that in this exact moment, which is why I don't really want to harp on it too much. If total 2 was up here or something like that, and we're approaching the 702 Fibonacci retracement level over there on Bitcoin, I would probably be making a lot of videos on it right now. But there's just not that type of environment happening of something we've seen historically for me to waste a lot of time doing it. But 19,300 is going to be an interesting level in here, and to see how the market reacts and if euphoria re-enters into the market. So pay attention to that. If you start seeing people be really euphoric at $119,000, the altcoins are pushing off into very specific resistance levels. Either way, we'll get to that at that time if that shows up. But as for my cautionary concerns heading into an event that has a very specific date that we're approaching, that retail is looking forward to, that's one to pay attention to. But again, if you're going to draw parallels to that, to 2021, and talk about it in the terms of Elon Musk going on Saturday Night Live and Doge, what was different about that? We were already in euphoria. We were already in insanity. We were in Wall Street bets, diamond hands, laser eyes. We're all going to make it. We were in all this crazy stuff, and that's just nowhere to be seen right now. And typically, we are seeing that already by the time we are getting here. It's just not there. And so the moral of the story is, the way I described it in the newsletter, is that we are on a razor's edge. We have an event that historically causes a lot of volatility in markets. And we are at a point right here that determines whether or not this is going to be irrational, exuberant euphoria with the crowd pouring in, or a rejection off of the biggest resistance that we've had in the cryptocurrency market in all of history. we're right there on that razor's edge of going one way or the other. There's no other resistance out there that's as big as the one that we're at right now. Clearing it and breaking through it creates an entire story of excitement. Going through this big event to happen here on Wednesday and getting the polar opposite is then a rejection off of the biggest resistance in history. And we're going to be going through this together. And it's hard for me to sit here and predict what is going to happen exactly from this meeting because the cold hard truth is I don't know. But what I can present to you is show you there's certainly a dynamic shift that's happening here throughout the market. We have fascinating setups throughout the market. We have confluence throughout the market for a time period where there could be a major catch up that could happen in here. And if we were to choose it together, and if we were to say, well, what is a dynamic that we would look for to imply that this isn't going to happen and that we're going to reject from here, what is something that we would look for? Well, we would look for irrational exuberance to be happening. We'd look for the crowd to be pouring in. We'd want to be seeing it on back-end data. And we would be thinking that the crowd would be pouring in like we saw back in November of last year, where the crowd comes in to buy the top. Yet, as we are back at the high, that is nowhere to be seen. So we're right on the edge of the biggest moment in crypto's history, at least dating back for the last 5 years. Up here sits glory. Down here, we all go back to the waiting room, and we're right on the edge of a giant catalyst approaching the market, waiting to see if the stock market is going to respond accordingly. It's intense. It's not just any moment in the market. It's the moment in the market. We've had highest daily closes above 2021 and above 2024, and even above these peaks here in August of earlier this year. There's one spot remaining, and we're here at the exact same time we're having a major event happening in macro markets. So there's reasons to be excited. There's reasons to be optimistic. There's positive structural setups in the market. We can see them in various locations and with various assets. The crowd is non-existent. Something that typically marks tops is when they're all here, but they're not. They usually pour in on the breakout of the all-time high. And as we head into this week together, it's bound to be extremely volatile. And fingers crossed, this week is the week we actually get the movement to happen. I'm really not surprised to see that we're pulling back on Monday, waiting for the stock market to open, because throughout the whole weekend, I'm thinking to myself, man, there's no way this is going to happen without the Russell. But now markets are going to open, and we're going to go through Wednesday together, and we're going to find out if this is actually going to be the catalyst to get us out into the new all-time high and finally bring that missing crowd in. So it will be a very busy week. And of course, on Wednesday, we'll be together twice. We'll have markets in the morning, and then we'll have the last Fed live stream that we'll be doing. Till then, as we go through Monday and as we go through Tuesday and really the first half of Wednesday, we're all kind of waiting for this big event to happen and see how it's going to end up impacting the market. So we'll do it together. And in the meantime, you can catch up on really the big picture of where we're at with macro, where we're at with Bitcoin, altcoins, gold, equities, Fed rates, what the market's looking for with this Fed meeting, Bitcoin dominance and safety trade dominance, crowd behavior, and probably for the last time taking a look over there at the developers and the user activity levels of the chains in the cryptocurrency market right now as we're pressing on this all-time high. If this thing ends up busting out, that's probably the last time we're looking at that. But we run through those again. We take a look at the snapshot of current state of chains with active developers, growing developers, TVL, who's in growth in TVL, to see the actual underlying data of what chains are being worked on and being used on in the crypto market, rather than just looking at their market caps or what people are telling us over there on X. So it's a doozy. It's 43 minutes long with an audio recording over here at blockchainbacker.substack.com. The biggest cycle event arrives, knocking on all-time high and a catalyst. Bitcoin, altcoins, and stocks on the edge with the Fed decision, fate, and developer and user activity stats. So as we wait for the Fed, I try to put a big snapshot of where we are in the crypto market right now and the equity markets right now and gold. You can go to that directly at blockchainbacker.substack.com, or there is a link down here in the description of this video. Otherwise, a big week ahead of us, potentially the week. So we'll be here for all of it. But all right, that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice and I am not a financial advisor, But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.